Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this blessed Sabbath day, and I ask for a blessing on the words I'm about to speak. Help it to be clear and coherent, and um, help it to make sense, and open our minds and our hearts to be able to search ourselves, Lord, to find the different things that we're struggling with that are keeping us from moving forward. The presentations we're going to go over have a lot to do with sexism and equality in the movement and what we have to do to change to be able to move forward with our message, because right now there's a lot holding us back. So I ask that you please make us all open to hear and understand the wise words of our elder Tess and these presentations that she gave us, and help us, Lord, to find other avenues and places of information to help us see more how subtle sexism can take shape and form in our movement, and how we can recognize it in people's actions and in even the Bible, Lord, because there's a lot of places where we don't know that it is in there. We ask that you be with us, help us to see things in an adult and mature way, and to be able to grow from these messages. We thank you when we pray all of this in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Okay, where are we? So there's two presentations. These are from the more recent ones that Elder Tess has been doing with LeGrand Cree at their camp meeting. And these are the ones from um, October. So the Form and the Spirit Part 1 from October 24 and the Harvest Part 2 from October 26. So I don't know if you guys have seen them or not. I'm not sure if I want to stop after the first one and then read some of this article and have discussion, or if I'm going to wait till after I'm done with both. I guess when's my limit here? Is it 4:30?
When everybody wants to quit. We're scheduled till 4.
4? Okay.
So you go until they all say no more.
Okay. I guess I'll have to see how long it takes the first one, and then we'll see. But basically, I'm just gonna read the transcript of what she said. There isn't really much that I wanted to cut out for time's sake because it's all kind of builds and it's really important. So we're just gonna read over that, and if everyone can kind of try to think about this while I'm reading it, because we always talk about sexism and there's sexism in the movement and we know we're dealing with it, but I don't think we ever have like a discussion amongst ourselves of what are things we've all noticed. Elder Tess has been doing that. She's been showing different examples of what she experienced like at FFA. So um
They're
let's see.
asking if you can make the font bigger.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I can do that. I was just trying to see what they were saying. Let's see. We can do this and this. Let's do that. How's that?
So they usually like 140 or 150. Oh, that's good. Right there. Well, what you had just a second ago.
I know, but I did a weird thing and it made it small for me. So
Okay.
here we go. Does that work?
Um, anybody? It looks good to me. It looks like about where Sister Ellie likes it.
Good for me.
Okay.
I'm getting perfect, and thank you so much.
Yay. Awesome. It works better for me too because now I can read it also. um, so what I wanted everyone to do is just kind of think about there's overt sexism and then there's subtle forms of sexism which are deeply embedded and hard to recognize and hard to kind of weed out, and we have to be in the process of weeding this stuff out because we can't even focus. That's why I ended up not doing the Esther thing, because there's no point from what Elder Tess has been saying. If that we have an emergency in the movement right now with this equality issue, and there's no point in focusing on any of that other stuff until this is dealt with, because we're not going to be able to understand the other stuff. So if you guys want to think about your own experiences, and then we can kind of talk about it and see kind of what that looks like. I have a couple things that I wanted to point out that just from life experience I noticed, and I still am not good at understanding all of it. I've had to look at some articles, and there's an article we're going to read. Um, what is this? Women Rising, the Unseen Barriers. And it's talking about leadership position of women in organizations. Because I don't know if any of you all have at work, your work gives you little training videos. It says we have to treat everyone equally and da da da. I have those at work too, but they don't really do that much to combat these little hidden barriers that there exist for women when they're leaders. And it just goes into some of the subtle things that people don't realize happen, that really when a woman's in a leadership position, it like discourages and causes a lot of problems and slowdown of growth. So I think it's pretty pertinent to what Elder Tess has been talking about. So I wanted to go over that. So if part one reading takes too long, then I'm going to stop after part one, and that's when we're going to have some discussion and go over this, and then start the other one if we have time. All right. So here we go from the Form and the Spirit, part one. I'd like to thank Sister Christiane for her introduction to the camp meeting. In the earlier presentation, she covered the reform lines. She recognized what needed to be reinforced before the people of God. I'm hoping that everyone participated in those presentations and received the blessing I did. So this is the first of my presentations that I will take this camp meeting. People have asked a few questions over the last 2 weeks that I will try to address in this camp meeting. It's quite an array of questions, but particularly centering on 2 questions. The first is the increase of knowledge. Where are we on the reform line? And if we have passed Concord, as I have said, what does that mean externally and what does that mean internally? How does that relate to the test of this dispensation? That is the first issue people are wrestling with that I'd like to address. The second subject is not a new one. It's something that was presented in the last dispensation over a year ago, that for various reasons people are still struggling to accept. That is the statement of this movement, that there is no literal Sunday law. So we're also going to look at that subject. I was asked to present 2 weeks ago by LeGrand Cree, and that presentation 2 weeks ago was done as an introduction to this camp meeting. So I've repeated some of that board work behind me. The lower part, these are the structures that could apply equally to ancient Israel or modern Israel. When looking at the reform lines, we can cut them and overlay all 4, 2 for ancient and 2 for modern. That is not what I'm wanting to do in this camp meeting. So what she was talking about, I'm going to doodle it real quick. So we know we have 4, so we'll say ancient Israel has an alpha and an omega, and we can stack those. And then modern Israel has also an alpha and an omega, and we can all stack them because they both all 4 have a similar structure. But this isn't what her goal was. We wanted to look at it like this. You have ancient Israel and you have alpha, and you have modern Israel, and you have, so you have, this one is going to tell us of this history for us, and this one is going to tell us of this history for us. I think we all know this structure pretty well, so that's all she's talking about. Let's see here. So that's not what I am wanting to do in this camp meeting. I would rather us visualize it this way. Ancient tells the story of modern. So the history of Moses and Joshua tells us, in a special sense, the history of the Millerites. So we can say Moses and Joshua tells us of the Millerites. Okay. And then the history of Christ and John the Baptist tells us the history of the 144,000. Okay. So instead of drawing both of these, they have the exact same structure, ancient and modern. So we have the beginning of the history of Israel, ancient or modern, and the end of Israel, ancient or modern. That is how we want to think of these histories in this camp meeting. So 2 weeks ago in the introduction for this camp meeting, we discussed the Apis Bull. What I particularly wanted us to do was step back and look at the big picture, the whole view of the great controversy and how God is trying to form his image into humanity. That is what this top line is attempting to illustrate. So I want to begin with a review of that history. Without getting too much into specifics, an overview. So studies that should already be well established in the movement I won't review, but I will refer to, particularly the nature of man. Over here in Eden, there was a creation. Over here at the second advent, we receive new bodies. So there is a recreation. I don't mind if people write in the chat to answer. When we receive our physical new bodies here at the second advent, are they fully developed? In form or in size? I'm getting a lot of no. Correct. They are not fully formed. So we are going to grow in that 1,000-year time period. I'm assuming we all know those quotes, so I'm not going to spend the time to prove that. Adam will be towering over us. We have not grown to that stature. That will occur over time. Why doesn't God just create us at the height he intends us to be? So that's the physical body. God is going to create us shorter and then let us grow. Then comes the character. When people are raised from the grave, are they raised a nicer person than when they went down? No. The same way a person goes down is the same way they come up. God doesn't tweak them a little and make them nicer, more tolerant, more patient. Many people can't wait to get to heaven so they can play the harp. We should be 144,000 or aspire to be. At the second advent, will God touch you and you will immediately know how to play the harp? It is hard work now. It will be hard work there. Someone says learn to play it now in the chat. Don't know if they have checked the price of harps, which they are insanely expensive. So whether it comes to our physical bodies, new perfect bodies, but there is still a work to do. Mind, character, personality is the same, and talents are the same. So if that's the creation here, if God is that hard a parent, if you want to put it that way, that he makes us learn, what about God as a parent here at the first creation? How were Adam and Eve created? Physically, in their understanding of the character of God and in their skill and abilities. Just one sentence quote from The Advocate, August 1st, 1990. He, God, who taught Adam and Eve in Eden how to tend to the garden, would instruct men today. Were they were they created and suddenly knew how to garden? No. They knew nothing about gardening. They were not created with that skill set. They were created like a child. Then, like a new human beings, they had to learn. So God taught them how to run a garden, how to take physical care of themselves. They did not know these things when they were created. Did God create Adam knowing he was lonely? No. He was created, then God set up a series of experiences through which he would realize what loneliness felt like. God did not create that inbuilt. They had to learn. I'm going to read from CTR 19.2. Adam and Eve received knowledge through direct communion with God, and they learned of him through his works. So they are created not knowing. They do not know of God, let alone understand his character. That does not make them sinful, that just makes them ignorant in innocence. but they are going to have to go through systematic education to understand how to operate the external world, how to understand themselves, and how to understand God. Last sentence of that quote. But by transgression, the human family was cut off from learning of God through direct communion, and to a great degree through his works. So they had the opportunity to learn directly from God until sin arrives. So we had a quick and vague look at a timeline a couple of weeks ago. To be very vague, from creation to the flood is about 1500 years. Genesis 4:25, by this stage you have had sin enter, and you have had the death of Abel. Cain kills Abel. First recorded human death and murder. Adam and Eve have another son called Seth. Eve says, God has replaced Abel for me. So when Cain killed Abel, Adam and Eve had another son who was the replacement of Abel. In Genesis 5:3, Adam was 130 years old when Seth was born. So from creation to the birth of Seth is 130 years. So you know that when Cain killed Abel, it would have been at the latter end of the 130 years. So now we have narrowed down the time frame to 130 years. How soon after creation did sin arrive? This we're not told, but God tells Adam and Eve, replenish the earth. It's a divine mandate. They have perfect bodies, there is no problem with conception, and yet when sin arrives, there is no children. So the general understanding is that sin arrived in the first year. Asher says it is the first day of the 10th of I think it was the 10th month, not the first. I'm pretty sure that's what that was.
Yeah, 10th, she said, yeah.
Yeah. I find that conjecture, so I'll be vague and just say a year. Eve had not given birth, so they are created with no knowledge. They have a short time frame and direct communication with God. Sin arrives and destroys everything. Satan makes it his sole purpose to misinterpret the character of God to humanity. And the very first next generation, he has done that to such a degree that two children of these so-called perfect parents have a quarrel and one kills the other brutally in cold blood without any guilt. So in what kind of condition were they? You might think that in that time period of direct communication with God, I recognize they had brilliant minds. Most of those intellectually brilliant minds in this movement left. I understand they weren't affected by sin, but the disciples had 3.5 years of direct communication with God. How much progress has Peter made in 3.5 years? He has made quite a bit of progress, actually, but he is far from immortal, far from what you and I might call even nice. We think if you and I have 3.5 years following Jesus, we would be perfect. We should be really nice people, all our doctrines sorted out, completely loyal to the Son of God. He fed 5,000. At the end of his time on earth, he is left with enough people who can squish into an upper room, and they were far from nice. So Adam and Eve created, they don't understand the character of God. They're not like a computer where that chip is just inserted with a file that says how to garden, loneliness, character of God. They are an innocent blank slate, blank whiteboard. Then they are expected to learn. They're going to be taught how to garden, taught that they need each other, taught what God is like. That experience was never to end. But it is quickly cut off, their education. Then you have sexism soon after, and soon after racism enter into the human experience. So nearly 2,500 years before Genesis is even written, and those things become codified because by the time Genesis is written, it is going to be written with that perspective in mind. Name the 3 sons of Adam. We know Seth, Cain, and Abel. Now name his daughters. You can't. How long did Adam live? And how long did Eve live? You don't know. What were the names of Noah's sons? What was the name of his wife? You don't know. His daughter-in-laws? You don't know because their sinful experience becomes codified in the words. They were meant to be learning still without sin 6,000 years later. If they were standing today still alive, they would still be learning, but it would have been without sin. So God is having to do the same thing he originally intended with much greater difficulty in the middle of a war. If you understand the subject of dispensationalism, such thoughts will come as no surprise. But what we can tend to do is get confused that somehow everything was perfect back here, in the sense that they had a complete understanding. My parents might not be perfect, but my sister and I are not going to kill each other. Something went wrong very bad and very quickly. It took one generation. The brutality, extended brutality, it would have taken to take the life of Abel. So when we have 6,000 years of progression, people say God never, real quick, does anyone have anything to say or any ideas or thoughts? Because I'm kind of just plowing through this.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay. So we have had 6,000 years of progression. People say God never changes. I agree. What we forget is the people that he is speaking to do change. We have discussed all of this last year. The problem that people have is they are down here in 2020. Like every good evangelical, they believe in a literal to literal reading and they want to go back to here. Say God never changes, so what he said back here was good enough for me. The problem is he expects a lot more from you than he did from them. Last year we made strong statement that everyone who doesn't believe that should be practicing slavery, and we made the call for consistency. We referred people to Leviticus 25:35. This passage talks about slavery among Israelites. People quote this to show how it was all meant to be nice. After 6 years, you go free. You can't hurt your slaves. Don't deal harshly with them. They forget 44-46. Don't rule fellow Israelites harshly, but those other nations, they will be slaves forever. They never go free. The 10 Commandments are in Exodus chapter 20. Chapter 21 is laws about slaves. While people acknowledge that much of this is awful, for the time period, it was revolutionary that you would be told to be nice to your slave. Those Israelite slaves can go free. Verse 7 says, if a man sells his daughter, she won't go out like the men do. It's talking about a father selling his daughter to be an extra wife to a man practicing polygamy. You have a slavery and polygamy formally institutionalized in the chapter directly after the 10 Commandments. So if we want to go back to that time period and say it's directly after and say it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us, then 150 years, or is it 150 years ago, we wouldn't have been Millerites. You would have been Mormon. What the United States said, slavery was good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Today, they say the Constitution applies to us. We have to treat the citizens of the United States after the dictates of the Constitution. But when they are performing war crimes in Afghanistan or to the family they bomb in Syria, does the Constitution apply to them? No, the rules change. In today's message, do we find that acceptable? The only way you can read and see consistency from Exodus to Ellen G. White is to recognize that while God doesn't change, his expectations of you and I do. So for 6,000 years, God is teaching us of his character, but he is doing that in an environment of sin that impacts the words written on the page. We have to recognize that. In that environment of sin, the threat that has been planned by Satan, which care is that he will misrepresent the character of God. This was when we started discussing the Apis Bull. I just wanted to stop real quick because I thought that was really interesting when I was writing this up. I never thought about that, applying the US Constitution to all the other countries around the world, because you think, well, it's the US Constitution, it's for the United States. But what that Constitution says is that all men are created equal. If you just want to apply that to white men, that's still wherever they are on the world. It doesn't say all men in the United States only are created equal. It says all, which, if you're even back then with misogyny in mind and their discrimination in mind, that would still apply to a greater area than just the United States. But no one ever applies it that way because it has am I thinking Declaration or the Constitution? I'm getting confused, but whatever it is, either one, the Constitution is the one that makes laws specifically talking about rights for human beings, and it doesn't specifically. It's just it's an idea that should be applied to everyone. You know what I mean? In just the concept of what it is, it should be applied to everyone. You can't just say a country's borders now, state that all those other people are not created equal, because they're all created. So if you're created equal. It just doesn't make any sense. So when she said that, well, why don't we apply the Constitution to Afghanistan and Syria and all the people all over the rest of the world? That is I never thought of that before. That's a really good question. So I just wanted to point that out.
I have a comment
Yeah.
about that very thing. In this website, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State,
Yeah.
they have a statement that they had made that church-state separation is thus not only an historic principle, it's also America's great gift to the world. Under the separation policy, Americans have enjoyed more religious freedom than any other people in history. So we are a symbol and an example to the world, even though we are the only ones that has this Constitution. So we are an example to the world.
Yeah, we are. And people had that idea in mind vaguely, like, oh, well, we're setting a standard that everyone else should follow. But then when you go off treating people in other countries the way you do, you're destroying your own example that you were setting.
Right. And people in other countries really look to America because of that standard as a watchman. It's almost like they have a hope in America because of that Constitution.
Like the
It's
glorious
really
land,
amazing.
like the glorious land.
Yeah, if you guys have seen on social media how not well anywhere on articles and whatever else, there are so many people in countries all over the world who got so insanely emotionally invested in this election, because to them Donald Trump signalized the death of an American ideal that they wish they would have had in their country for freedom and rights. So everyone around the world was looking at the United States, has been looking at the US, like what is, like, it's gonna directly impact them immediately. You know what I mean? It was just the amount of investment was incredible, which should really, wake people up how big of a deal it is. But I just thought it was really fascinating. And Sister Oni says, yes, America is the land of opportunity, which is, those opportunities are dwindling.
And looking at it as a laughing stock, because that's what the Lord said he would do if we did not fulfill our purpose. The ancient Israel didn't fulfill their purpose. They would, they were to be an example of the greatness, and then they would become an example or a byword.
Yeah.
To be mocked and laughed at.
And so that is exactly what happened in countries all over Europe and South America, Canada, everywhere, from on every side of this globe. People are just scrutinizing the US with a magnifying glass because it's
very interesting to think of what it's going to look like as we continue to go forward with what many are thinking is a good thing, and yet we know that it's headed in still a bad direction.
yeah. There's going to be a lot of disheartening when they realize that Joe Biden isn't really going to get much done.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big disappointment. But I mean, it's that book by Percy Tilson McGann, and the way he talks about how, if you think of a country, if you personify it and give it a conscience, right? That would be the US's conscience is the Constitution. It shows its moral compass through that document. So when he started to show its actions changing, when it started the colonizing thing where it went to help Cuba because it felt bad with what was happening there because of Spain colonizing. But then what it did with the Philippines, it completely turned its heel on its own moral standards, because that was just horrifying what it did with the Philippines there. And everyone's eye was on the United States from the start, because it was an experiment that had never existed before, this land of freedom with this strange words in its, documents saying all this freedom and separation of religion and all this crazy stuff that no one had ever heard of before. So everyone's watching to see if it's going to succeed or fail. And it's been, from the moment of its conception, in the eye of every other nation on the face of this earth. So it's really, and even as messed up as the Constitution is for the problems that it does have, it was still like, where did she say up here, when God told them that, oh, treat your slaves nicely. It sounds crazy to us, but for them at that time, that was revolutionary. So for the United States at that time, it had a lot of problems, but it was still more revolutionary than anyone had seen anything like up until that point, you know? And we were supposed to keep growing. Why the people, what are they called? The people who believe in a literal reading, originalists? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so. The literal reading.
Not the literal, but like the people who want to go interpret the Constitution by the original intent of the founding fathers, because they were all pretty racist and misogynistic. So if you interpret it to their original intent, it's going to be sexist and racist and homophobic,
Yeah, that's originalist.
Yeah. So how you can not see that you're supposed to grow, it's this lesson is written everywhere. It takes a long time. It took us a long time to kind of see and understand it. But the fact that, we don't have slaves right now anymore should be a big sign, because if you want to go back to the originalist interpretation, then you should have slaves today. And I don't see any of them who believe that trying to do that. It's just inconsistent and it doesn't make any sense. But
I think Amy Coney Barrett is an originalist.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure that woman. She's going to talk about her too here in just a minute, about the compare and contrast between the notorious RBG and the infamous ACB. I didn't know they were calling her that, but yeah, her record in the legal system, the types of judgments she passed it's scary. Anyways, let's go back to reading this. Back here, they understood a little of the character of God, and even that little was too much for them. It shouldn't have been, but for many it was. As he lays out his instructions in Exodus, the problem with people is they are molded after the mindset of Egypt. So God is having to try and not just teach them of his character, but then imprint his character onto them. So we discussed how they rebelled against that with the Apis bull, idolatry. There are two parts to idolatry. Each on their own still constitutes idolatry. There is the physical form of the idol, then there is the character, the mind of the idol. What they did is they took this pagan deity. They didn't say that they were worshiping this pagan deity. They said because they didn't have enough information about God, they were going to mix their understanding of God with another deity. They're going to mix both. They're going to call this Jehovah. We all know the consequences of that decision. God labors with them generation after generation. Over time, they lose the form of idolatry, but the mindset of paganism does not leave them. So when Jesus comes and walks on earth, they do not recognize him. I'll read Christ Object Lessons 34.4. Christ's mission was not understood by the people of his time. The manner of his coming was not in accordance with their expectations. They could not understand the time of the end. Someone messaged me recently. Some people may think I am popular. I'm really not. This message went something like this. You wicked woman, you took us out of Adventism, the Church of God. You defend 1989 to me. Clearly that gentleman has left the movement, and all I can say to him is, I'm sorry, the time of the end was not in accordance with your Adventist expectations. So back to the quote. The Lord Jesus was the foundation of the whole Jewish economy. Its imposing services were of divine appointment. These maxims and traditions became an obstacle to their understanding and practice of true religion. They rejected the antitype and clung to their types and useless ceremonies. The Son of God had come, but they continued to ask for a sign. The message, repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, they answered by demands for a miracle. The gospel of Christ was a stumbling block to them because they demanded signs instead of a savior. Signs or a savior? Which one do the people prefer? The people prefer signs. But what does God say that they need? I feel like we are doing the same thing today. I know this is going into a different subject. Back in early 2018, time setting was accepted and many people started to calculate with numbers. By this stage, I already knew all those calculations were in error. One of the evidences that they were in error is that they did not require a change of character. It's peace and safety to have a calculation of numbers. When the time was given, it came in a package that required a change of mind. Moving on to the next subject, the pandemic. I think many people feel like they have been failed because we did not predict the pandemic. We could have. It's clearly in World War I. We probably should have, but did we need to? If we have been nice, something to hold up towards, it would have been nice, something to hold up towards Adventism and say, see, we told you so. It would have been a nice sign. But the message when it comes, it might not have been what you wanted, a sign in advance. What you received is what you need. What you needed was to vaccinate your children, to let go of your conspiracy theories, to let go of the idea of a deep state, to trust the medical establishment. A prediction of the pandemic might have made you feel good and saved some money, but God doesn't care about the sign. He cares about your mind. What we need was to change our views on vaccination. Because if God is parent, he wants you safe, much more than feeling good and saving some money. Many people today are saying the same thing as the Pharisees said about the U.S. the not the U.S. election. They weren't there. Oh no, was it the Greek or no, the Roman? Yeah, they are treating it as a sign that they can hang their faith on. In the form of the message, God has been walking among them for years, and they're saying, give us a sign. I would like to understand it better, but I am well aware for the people struggling in this movement, it will not help you. If you don't already have a faith in Sister Christiana's presentation this morning, they expected the Messiah to prove his claims by mighty deeds. Not by this is the kingdom of God to prevail, but by the implanting of a new principle in the hearts of men. It has to change your heart. Regardless who wins this election, God has already done that. He has already shown you clearly how you relate to Trump and how you relate to Biden. He has laid that out in Millerite history, which we call the subject of compromise, and has already been taught. To stake our claim in a sign is to project the message. I suspect that in the time of trouble, God won't anchor our faith just by a sign. Everyone knows that many in the movement are struggling. You see, when it comes to idolatry, there is the form and there is the mind. They left the form. They held on to the mind. Now, when we get into our own history, when it comes to equality, you have the same thing, the form of equality and the mind of equality. The character, for those reading along, the character, the heart of equality. The danger is that in the thought that in accepting or rejecting the form, we have stated our position. In 2019, that was a little bit confusing. What she's saying is that we have a danger that in thinking that now women can wear trousers on this, we think we accepted, the fact that we like women in leadership roles, but that doesn't mean that you've had a change of mind yet. So in 2019, the form was announced. Women elders, trousers, rejection of nationalism, women in leadership across the world, women rising up and teaching across the world field. And this movement instituted the form. For many people, that was too much. They left. That was the division of 2019. The issue that we are facing in 2020 is not the form of equality, but the mind. It is a compare and contrast. It is a chiasm, idolatry and equality, the form and the mind. With idolatry, they lost the form and held on to the mind. That is error. With the true, they took the form, not yet the mind. It's like two different magnets. I should say same magnets. So just highlight this real quick. So what she's saying is that past and present, there's a little bit of a chiasm thing going on. So let's say we have equality in ancient Israel. So they had the what is it? They had the, I don't know how to say this. They had the form plus mind here. And then they lost the form at some point, and then they just had the mind. And here for us, it's where is it? What did we do?
I put
We
the
have
image of their board, of her board work in the chat too, a little bit ago.
You did?
Yeah,
Hold on, let me see. And we lost the form, so we still have the mind. So it's the same, but it's just they kept idolatry's mind, and no, so I don't know what she meant by chiasm. Let me see the picture. Desktop. Where did you go? Let me switch.
yeah, I didn't understand it, trying to see it as a chiasm.
Yeah, I don't think she.
Not that one, it's the other one. There's two that I put in. It was the first one.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like it just seems like pretty much we're doing the same thing that they did.
Yeah.
So we have to get rid of the mind. They got rid of the form, but they kept the mind and all those traditions and ideas of conservative view of what a leader looks like, what God's character looks like. And so, oh, no. I see what. So as far as equality goes, we don't have the mind, we just have the, I see what happened. So let me see here.
We let go of the form, but we.
So this is
Yep.
inequality, inequality, and this is equality. So,
If you're back on your notes, we can't see.
oh. So this is what they did with inequality. Let's do that. So with equality, all we have is the form. So we don't have the mind. And we need to have the mind too. We need to have the form plus the mind, because all we did last year was just the form.
Adriana,
Huh?
can you define form?
The form is physical. So for ancient Israel, it was idols, real physical idols. And the form for us is trousers and women in leadership
Yeah.
positions. So outwardly, we have, this here, and it looks like we are getting it, but it's not. You have to have the mind also.
Because as you can't continue forward in equality if you only have the form, if it's not in the mind, it will cause you to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the form is just faking it.
Right.
It's like whited sepulchres with dead bodies inside. Like Elder Parmenter did a presentation a long time ago. Okay, so
Following the laws, the rabbinical laws.
yeah,
not Form.
right. So Elder Parmenter can sit there and make laws and say, okay, now women have to wear trousers. Now, we have women elders and all of this. And everyone's like, okay, I'll follow that. But in your heart, you're not understanding it in a deeper meaning of what it is.
And we need to understand it because that's where they're going to see the glory of God in these people that are lifted up because they understand heavenly equality.
But maybe they didn't really even accept it then? They just wanted to stay?
So yeah, that's what she kind of gets to, is that I don't remember if it's in this one or the next one, but she basically says the people who just rejoiced over equality last year and it was not that big of a test for them, now they're the ones struggling because they didn't really understand equality the way they thought to begin with. So it's really interesting because that what they thought it was actually what Elaine was saying, was that they thought equality was the far left, and the far left is
They don't
it's not real.
equality either.
Yeah.
Like with the AOC, who's in the far left, she's still wearing dresses and makeup.
Yeah, exactly. So what Elder Tess pointed out is, look at Hollywood. There is no equality in Hollywood. Women have to do so much surgery and so much makeup and so much nonstop focusing on their weight and all of this. Where in the world do you see equality on the left? It's no such thing. You know what I mean? But it's a counterfeit. It pretends to be. That's why it's more dangerous almost. The right is clear. From our message's perspective, it's night and day. It's easy. It should be easy. But the left is the tricky one because they pretend. Because, yes, the mind forms our character. Thank you, Donna and Renee. That's exactly right. So they repulse each other. So this movement has the form of equality, while many in it have the mind of inequality. Many who have rejected the form have already left. What people still here don't realize is the test of the mind. This is not a peace and safety message that says you just have to say women are equal. So when we go to Africa and we say we won't baptize you if you pay dowry, countries that largely escaped the shaking of the last dispensation are utterly collapsing because they never expected that the form would have implications for how they thought or how they lived. It's one thing to say women are equal. It is one thing to put a woman on a board, make her a leader, have her teach, have her run your school. It is another thing to empower her and treat her with respect when she does do these things. I'm going to highlight this because this is where things get tricky and I think we have to focus. So we'll come back to that. People who like the idea of the form are finding it excruciatingly painful to change the mind. Country by country, individual by individual that is facing that test and the time of trouble begins to crumble. When a man says, I want to be baptized, I want to be a leader, I want to sit at the organizational table, and I know that he goes through the phone of his wife, we are going to have a problem because the form has not transitioned into the mind and character. Organization cannot ignore mind and character, and investigation of them is a requirement of baptism. Many liked the idea of equality, but are rebelling against the change of character that it inevitably has to bring with it to be successful. Country by country that faces the realization begins to crumble. If there are the two issues with idolatry, then we face the two issues with true worship. They have the mind of paganism. We have the mind of evangelical Protestantism. So this is what she's saying. Ancient Israel had paganism, and we have evangelical Protestantism in modern Israel. I have seen that form. The secondary memory I have had in my life, and almost every memory from then to 20, was a quiet observation of sexism in the conservative Adventism. The expectations of submission, the denigration of a woman and women's work, the Adventist men that would call their wives their cows, the inbuilt accepted sexism. I fled into morally liberal Adventism with the high heels and the makeup, singing at the front of a large churches, modern Christian music with a beat. Carrie Job, Casting Crowns, they are Protestant rock stars. Morally liberal Adventism. I found sexism just the same. One of the hardest battles that I fought was letting go of rock music. Heavy rock music and rap, the darker the better. My morally liberal friends introduced me to modern Protestant evangelical musicians. So I decided as I came into this movement that I needed to leave my rock music behind. So I decided I will do this in steps. I will let go of the heavy rock music and I will just listen to evangelical musicians. I battled for months and I couldn't do it. One day I had a sense I was doing it the wrong way around and I couldn't understand why, but I knew that I was. I decided that I would abandon all of the evangelical musicians, listen only to rock music, and then I will let go of that too, and then listen to nothing until I could handle music again. I couldn't understand why I had that conviction until Donald Trump's election, and one by one, those evangelical musicians worshiped at his feet, played at his rallies, visited the White House, called for people to vote for him. The problem we have is we don't realize how much idolatry we have. This was not to be a critique about what music people should listen to. My point is not that. Please don't think so. My point is the following. I still think that when we listen to an evangelical musician sing, deep down we think we are worshiping the same God because they are not dancing around a physical golden calf. An article was posted to the media broadcast. It was about capitalism and libertarianism. All those old morally liberal and morally conservative friends I had in the latter reign of the Levites are fighting against government restrictions, fighting against wearing masks, crying out against the threat of socialism. Where did my friends get that from? You don't get much more socialist than redistributing wealth every 50 years. This is talking about Leviticus 25. If you guys remember, every 50 years they have to redistribute the wealth back to the people they took it from. So when they say the danger is socialism, my friend did not get that from the Bible. They got that from evangelical America. Because my conservative Adventist friend is neck deep in idolatry. I recognized their sexism about as soon as I could walk. Sitting among the women one day, the same community, one of those girls asked, "Would any one of you marry a black man?" There was an awkward silence until one nervous girl started to shake her head, and then one by one, they all said no. And I realized my friends weren't just sexist, they were racist. Sexism, racism, and homophobia. Conspiracy theories, vaccinations, libertarianism. It is time to see idolatry for what it is. Like the Jews of old, we have a blindness problem. Signs are nice. We can tolerate the form. We might even think it's beautiful until we say you have a female boss. Then every place across the world that has a female leader, all of a sudden people start to struggle because it starts to hurt. That is why 2020 is hard. If we think last year was hard, welcome to Jacob's time of trouble. When in a time period where Jacob is scared, the deep nature of his sin starts to attack him, and he can't recognize that the angel is there to change his heart and save him. I thought this was nice because the angel is there. We just have to grab hold. So in this camp meeting, we're going to discuss where we are on the reform line, acknowledging that people are abandoning reform lines entirely. We're going to go through the subject of the Sunday law. Both subjects at their core are about equality. Both subjects at their core are about taking us out of idolatry. A shaking is coming for the French world too, because there is as much in the French world as everywhere else a tendency to think that we can have a spiritualistic religion through studies that are not built upon the methodology, the prophecy of this movement, that are nothing more than a celebration of idolatry, worshiping a God built in their own image. So I sincerely hope that particularly the French world engage in every one of the meetings of this camp meeting as actively as though they were here in person. It is life and death, just as it was for Jacob. We're going to go through that experience as a movement. We're going to go through that experience, each individual. While we might like a sign, God, like a parent, tends to give us what we need. I will close in prayer. At my next presentation, we're going to discuss the increase of knowledge. If you kneel with me, we'll close in prayer. So that's that one. What I want to do now is kind of look at sexism a little bit. So in the next one, she kind of goes into the distress. I don't know how I want to do this because I really want to have a little discussion. I don't know how to do this. Let me see. Okay. This is where it is. So I'm going to put that there because I left a little space there. So I think I'm just going to read this first part of this. Is that okay for reading for everyone?
I'm okay. I don't know about
Looks
it.
good.
Okay. So she's going to do a little review and talk about a little bit more about sexism, and then we'll go into the notes here. My things that I want us to talk about. So I want to just do a little revision. There are two particular questions I want to answer. One is where we are on the line, on the reform line, and what that means for what is happening externally and internally, and the past, right now, and what we should expect. The other question relates to the nature of the Sunday law. Many people are struggling with the statement that there is no literal Sunday law. It may seem that these are two very disconnected questions, but if you go to the line of the 144,000, you would understand that we are in the increase of knowledge of the Sunday law. Without further understanding the subject of equality, it's impossible. It's impossible to answer the second question about the Sunday law. So it is actually hard to answer the two questions without blending them somewhat. As we answer these questions, I am reviewing the studies that have been presented in Australia since May, so I am making an assumption about my audience. I'm assuming I'm speaking to the people who have watched those presentations. There are three groups. There are three groups of people, I think I should say. Those who have not watched, those who have watched but have bad memories like I do, and those who have watched and remember. I'm speaking to that middle group, which I know I'm often in. You have watched, but you forgot. So the studies that are reviewing those nearly 6 months now, they are not a thorough review. In the last presentation, we used the study of the nature of man. The assumption is that people actually understood that study. So we can just refer to the nature of man as evidence for what we were building upon. So we are building upon what is previously established. So this is not a replacement where I'm saying you don't have to watch those studies. If you haven't, your faith will be small. You may not have confidence in what is being said. That's just a consistent problem that we have in trying to convince people of the truth when they are not watching presentations. Where is that? Okay. So we began by referring to the Apis Bowl. The Apis Bowl is the title of the first in that series, and it was the beginning point of that series that we built upon. We reviewed it in the last presentation. We saw that when it comes to idolatry, you have the form of it and the character of it, or the spirit, the mindset of inequality. So ancient Israel, they removed from themselves the form of idolatry, but they held on to the spirit of it. And when Christ came, he stood as a symbol of the king and the kingdom. Their understanding of the character of God was so warped, the mindset of their king that also was so warped, the mindset of their king that also impacted what they expected to see in his kingdom, and they saw nothing in that message that they could recognize or love. And of hundreds and of thousands of Jews who heard of Christ, 5,000 on a hill, we are left with a tiny group in an upper room because they had held on to the spirit of and the mindset of paganism. And what we discussed in those presentations is the mindset we have of evangelical thinking. In 2018, the midnight cry arrived, also known as the loud cry. What does the loud cry say? What point does it make? What is the message?
Yeah. I mean,
Is someone trying to ask a question? Tony needs to mute there. There we go. Okay. So it gives to God's, wait, where am I? What is the message it gives to God's people? Warning of close of probation, equality. Sister blank says, come out. I'm going to go with come out. Come out of what? Come out of her, my people, that ye do not partake of her sins. Someone else needs to mute. Okay, let me just, that's a little distracting there. Okay. So it uses the language that everyone can understand. Come out of Babylon that you do not partake of her idolatry and her sin. So whether that is literal, at one point it was because they had to physically leave Babylon. For us, no one leaves something physically. In our reform line, it is spiritual. Babylon does not exist. The city was destroyed. So using the parable of what ancient Israel had to do, physically leave the walls of idolatrous Babylon, leaving back in Babylon the form and the spirit of idolatry, so they do not partake of her sin of idolatry. So she's just saying they had to leave a physical place, but we have to leave it a mindset. It's a spiritual thing. So over here, and the loud cry of the 144,000, the Nethinims, the world, are called out of Babylon. What they're called out of is apostate Protestantism. So they do not partake of the form or the spirit of the idolatry of apostate Protestantism. Before you can call people out of a city, what do you have to do? Leave it yourself. So God has this problem. He wants all of these Nethinims out of Babylon. He needs his people to call them out. All his people are in Babylon partaking in its sin. This is why Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the first part of Acts are all about the story before 34 AD, before God's people go to the world at the Sunday law, before they go to the Gentiles. Because there's a lot of work God has to do before that loud cry calls the world out of Babylon, to have the people outside of Babylon capable of doing that. Outside of apostate Protestantism, it would be a lot easier if there were just an idol in Adventism and we could all just say, leave that figure in the church and come out. But the form is the easy part. The hard part of coming out of apostate Protestantism is the mindset that many people have been indoctrinated with since birth. We have followed their teachers, their pastors, their conspiracy theories. Last year, I started addressing Jordan Peterson. Many people followed and liked him. He has made a comeback these last days, and his new series is all about religion. Suddenly, he has a lot he wants to say about God. That was always incorporated into his message. His understanding of the kingdom of God. Before any disciples can go to the Gentiles to give the loud cry and call them out of Roman paganism, Greek paganism, those disciples first need to be called out of that mindset. The disciples in this history and any other Jews they can reach in this history. So in 2018 came the call, come out of apostate Protestant thinking. None of you were going to Protestant churches, but almost everyone, just like in ancient Israel, had the perspective and the worldview of apostate Protestantism. And what we find that apostate Protestantism particularly believes in, beyond their conspiracy theories, beyond their views of the medical establishment, beyond their views of religious freedom, beyond their views of capitalism, all of which we imbibed, is their views of equality. The methodology they use and inspiration to justify that inequality. Many people came out of that thinking, but just as ancient Israel had this issue of the form and the mindset or the spirit, the form was gone long ago. They destroyed that golden calf. The form of apostate Protestantism is Sunday keeping. So a Jew in Christ's day would say, I am not an idolater. I go to the temple. I worship no pagan god. There is no bull in my house. I am not taking part in pagan idolatry. And a modern Adventist will say, my great 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 grandfather was an Adventist pioneer. My family has been Adventist for generations. We don't keep no Sunday. We left that back in this history, and everyone knows that the sin of apostate Protestantism is their Sunday keeping, the physical form. They go and worship the sun every Sunday. And down here, they cannot recognize they have the spirit of idolatry, the spirit of evangelical Protestantism. But there are evidences of this all around. I have many friends who are socially conservative Adventists and acquaintances who are socially conservative Protestants, and the worldview and the warnings I am receiving from both are identical. One says we shouldn't be wearing masks. This is the control of the government. We shouldn't vaccinate. Careful of the globalist. Don't trust the UN. The threat is socialism. The New World Order is coming. Same exact perspective from both sides. So in 2018, God calls his people out of apostate Protestantism. We found we have to remove from their mindset, particularly when it came to the subject of inequality. So just as idolatry has the form and the spirit, we find that when we come to the truth, it can be kept in the form and the spirit. What we spoke of in our last presentation is that last year dealt with the form. We placed women in organizational positions, placed women as teachers. Many people left over just that, the form. But the spirit is harder. Many more will leave our equality in this dispensation, over equality in this dispensation, than left in the last, because they may have been willing to change the form, but didn't realize they had to change the heart. What I have repeatedly seen in many men who give the appearance of believing in equality, they see the sisters that are vulnerable. They can see their weakness. They go to them and encourage them, try to lift them up, get them teaching. All these vulnerable sisters. There was a very good article I can't find again. I'm going to continue to try to find it. Those famous leading evangelicals, those men like the Billy Grahams, the Jerry Falwells, particularly those who are leading pastors. This article was about their wives. So the husband gets up and he preaches. He has a straight message from the book of Matthew, and everyone says amen. He has their respect. Then his wife is going to speak. Mega church with hundreds of people. An evangelical will say they have great equality in this church because the wife speaks. They call them the warrior wives. What does she speak about? It spoke about what these women taught, but also interviewed them. They would get up and bare their souls, open themselves out to people. They would speak about how they had a difficult childhood and they had an eating disorder and body image problems. They would speak about their marriage, how they had a difficult time submitting to their husbands. But they found this book that helped them submit, how they had had problems in their marriage and then realized that it was actually just all about them. It was their fault. They were bad wives. They would speak about how they had lost children, the postnatal depression they experienced, how people at church irritated them and they got the victory over that. What this article addressed is that the man gives a straight message disconnected from himself and he has the respect of the people. What does the wife have to do? They interviewed these women and they acknowledged it freely. To even be considered likable, they had to show vulnerability and weakness. They knew that and they played upon that. So if they didn't have a story about an eating disorder or losing a child, some of them felt they needed to invent one so they would be liked and respected by the people. This is an issue I see in this movement. So this is a problem that we have to deal with. So many say they believe in equality because they look down on all these vulnerable women. They will say, I am not sexist. Look how much I encourage the sisters to teach, encourage them to lead. My wife is shy. I inspire her. Then they have a boss. I am not referring to myself, not because it doesn't apply and doesn't happen, but they end up with a boss who is a woman, and all of a sudden, there's a problem. Why do they find a problem? It is because she is not vulnerable warrior wife of evangelical Christianity. No one, not every, no one ever expected to show his backstory and his hurt to find him likable. Donald Trump has no problem looking down on vulnerable women and saying, I believe in equality, I care about you. But the minute he looks at someone like Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris, what is his favorite word? They are nasty. They are not likable. He doesn't say that about men. I'm going to highlight this as well, actually. So he doesn't say that about men. The issue with women is that unless they are vulnerable, they are not likable. No one had that problem with Elder Jeff. No one digs into Elder Parminder's past to feel like they can relate to him before they can like him. Many men are fine with this arrangement. It looks like they're doing a good job with equality. The danger is now we have women up here who are not vulnerable. If they are, they may not feel the need to tell you. Whether this is in schools, no one ever had to have Elder Gabriel's backstory before they showed him respect. So whether it's in local boards or continental leaders, unless there is an evidence of vulnerability, they are not liked. Men don't always protest. Instead, I find the following scenario. Like a child in a store, they just lay down on the ground and don't move. If I don't get what I want, I am just going to lay down on the ground and make your life hard. We are organizationally dragging them through this movement, and it slows things down. It makes everything go slow. So while people may complain, we don't fully understand the presidential election. One of the reasons why we don't is that your leaders have no time to study because night and day they are dragging people through equality. And that happens behind the scenes, but it is night and day. So I don't say that to start talking about the difficulty I have with time, because I can tend to talk about my past. I know there are women who can be helped by that. It can help give context. But I don't want any woman in this movement to think she needs to show vulnerability to have the respect to lead. The changes to the form, when you have women leading, it brings a crisis when the form has changed and not the spirit. That is one of the reasons that it is such a difficult year. It is because equality is far from being addressed fully. So Sister Christian had the first presentation of this camp meeting, and she addressed reform lines, the foundation of understanding our experience. We have laid out a structure that fits both ancient and modern. If I erase the dates, it can be either. We will make some room. Oh, okay. And then she goes into the rest. Eventually, I think toward this, here. I want to read this too. Hold on. We might go a little bit over. I hope that's okay, you guys. They have shown that they are holding on to the spirit of idolatry of paganism. It's harvest time. And would it be the kindness or the judgment of God to send rain? So she was just going over how in the Bible it says in the harvest it's dangerous to have rain because it ruins the harvest. So people who are looking for a new message shouldn't be doing that. So I think many people desire a new message in this time period. They don't realize how dangerous that is. There is a test in the last dispensation they have not yet had the victory of. So send new rain would be to destroy the harvest. The painful work must be done first. Prior to November 9, we had the latter rain. We had the message. There is no new message in this dispensation. If there was, it would destroy us. It would be the judgment of God that would destroy the crop because we wouldn't be able to handle it. The reason we wouldn't be able to handle it is perhaps we haven't done so well in the last dispensation as we might think. So obviously we still have Boston, Concord, Exeter, a repeating pattern. So you know there is a message. So I'm suggesting that there's a loophole. It's going to show there is a new message. We will deal with that loophole later. For now, no new message. It's God's care for his people that there is no new message. I suggested that it's because in the harvest we still have the mindset. I was going to make the point before I realized I didn't make. I know I beat up the men. I think we are all familiar with Ben Carson, my childhood hero. Donald Trump put him in charge of housing. So Ben Carson, he fights through institutional racism growing up, right? Not just in, if anyone ever read that book, which I think a lot of Adventists did, not just in people's treatment of him, but through the redlining that affected his whole upbringing. The schools he had access to, he fought against all of that to be greatly successful. He has become a good Republican, and what is he approach to all his suffering brothers and sisters? He turns to the Black Lives Matter protesters, says it's not that bad. Look at my inspirational story. I had to fight through all that, so you do too. Instead of lifting them up and making their paths easier than what he had to walk through, he sees them as lazy. They have the opportunities, he would say. I was successful. If they just work harder, they will be successful. He fails to show the care and the respect to his own group of people. I want to make a call to the women in this movement. You could compare and contrast two women, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and who else? Amy Coney Barrett, the notorious RBG and the infamous ACB. Two women, both of them have encountered institutional sexism. Both of them are going to do very different things for women. It's an external parable being played out, we are seeing internally. Because when those women pastors' wives stand up and talk and open up about the eating disorder they had as a child to all those women beneath them in the organizational hierarchy, are they trying to get the respect of the men or the women? The men probably aren't even listening, but it is the women who are saying, oh, good, I hurt as a child. You hurt too. I feel vulnerable and weak. I'm glad that my boss is vulnerable and weak, so I don't feel like there is a strong woman who is better than me or over me. This is important too. Where's I'll go to here. So they open up their vulnerability for the respect of other women. You can see externally that one of the issues that they're facing is that there are women on both sides of the political spectrum respecting two different mindsets. So it isn't just men who need to learn how to respect the women in leadership. It is the women also. Just like you see with Ben Carson and Amy Coney Barrett, you have the two different examples. It is a compare and contrast we should apply to this movement. How the women handle a woman boss. From a distance, they might like me. It's never the boss who is over your boss. It's the one who impacts your daily life. Women are battling their own sexism. The vast majority of women vote Democrat. There is a distinction between men and women in American politics, but there are too many examples of women who stand with Donald Trump for the sisters of this movement to not take that as a warning. To see the women who thought Hillary Clinton was nasty. So we have no rain in the harvest, and we should be glad for that, because we wouldn't be able to handle the rain. But as I said, there is a loophole. We will come to that later. So that's about all I want to read from these. If you guys want to unmute, I want some collaborative work here. What is it? Because this is our issue. So you have women in middle management leadership positions, right? That's what our issue is right now. So I'm going to put in test 2. I think there's people who are really irritated with her as well, but specifically from what Elder Parmender's recent presentations have been in Elder Test, it's the middle and lower management. So let's see. Middle man, women leaders. So if we look at what are the characteristics of the Apis bull? Do you guys go ahead and speak out there? We gotta know these.
John.
Courage. Courage. Courage.
What else?
Wasn't he a warrior king?
Fighting spirit.
Fighting spirit. How do you spell conquer?
Q.
Conqueror.
Q.
U. Q-U.
Forward.
And there's fertility too.
And we'll add fertility.
Epi. Fertility. That's a good one.
I blame English. You can't.
You can't blame English on farts.
You know. Okay. So, like lives, live and lives. It's too much. It's too much closeness with too many words. So this is Apis bowl. I wanted to do that. So let's do it like this. What are characteristics of traditional manliness?
A lot of the same. Strong. Leadership.
We'll wait for that one. We'll just say warrior or fighter.
Provider,
Courage.
What was that?
I say sorry.
I can't understand what it sounds really muffled.
This is Johnny. Can you put it in the chat?
I'm sorry. I said courage. It's already there. Thank you.
Oh, courage. Okay, okay.
Thank you.
non-emotional,
That yes.
Well, if you put defender.
Yeah.
Defender would be-
Provider.
Yeah, defender.
Defender, provider's already on there.
Is it? Yeah.
Brother David put protector.
Oh yeah, that's an important one. Protector. Okay. So there's that. I'm gonna put along with assertive, a little bit of a stronger personality. So what is traditional femininity? I think that's, yep. Okay. What are these qualities?
Well, I think it's, well, they say it and pretty much sum it up in 3 words, right? Barefoot drunk in the kitchen, much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that what the evangelicals want?
Kitchen.
We don't like it, but yes, that's what they say.
vulnerable,
Yeah.
Vulnerable. So yeah, let's break that down. So barefoot, let's say vulnerable, pregnant,
Weak and emotional.
emotional,
caretaker,
caretaker. Let's say, can we put empathetic for her, because that's usually like that caretaker, caring nature.
mhm,
So
Sensitive.
Nurturing spirit.
during, what was that? I think Jackie, what'd you say?
That was Christine.
Oh,
She said nurturing.
No,
but
Tony's saying sensitive.
yes, thank you. Perfect. Sensitive. Let's see. So
I don't want to stereotype on this, but how
We're-
about
I'm asking
about
for the stereotype.
things like uneducated?
and you.
How about submissive?
Yes, submissive. This is, I'm looking for the stereotypical ideals. So definitely not assertive. So I wanted to say meek.
Yeah, I said weak a little bit ago.
Oh, okay. We which week? Weak or meek? Anything else?
Loving and kind.
Loving, yep. Kind.
Virgin.
Yeah, so there another thing I was gonna oh, I just lost it, but it was really important. Oh, non-violent. Passive. So and if I'm gonna put passive here, I'm gonna put aggressive here.
What was the last comment someone said?
Makeup and beauty,
Ah, yeah.
high heels.
Yeah. How do I want to say that? Fashion.
Yeah, wasn't it, oh, I don't remember. Cori Bush. Right, so Cori Bush just got elected to the House, female, black. Anybody remember the story about her just a few days ago, a week ago maybe?
No.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what her occupation was before going into the House, being elected to the House. But apparently she didn't have the right dress, right shoes, the right look to be in the House. So I guess she had to be taken out with an AOC. But one of the other female members to go have her properly dressed to be in the House, which included like high heels, makeup, and all of that.
What?
Yes, and she didn't have the money because it's a lot of money to buy all that stuff.
What was her name?
Yeah, she didn't have the money, and so some of the congresswomen were going to help her, and AOC was one of them, I think.
What was her name?
Did AOC go through that when she started? It seems to me that she had that.
She did go through that as far as she didn't have the money and the finances to buy all the top clothes because she just didn't have it. But she made do with what she had.
Can you guys just tell me her name real quick, please?
Cori
Bush.
Cori Bush. I mean, right, Cori Bush said she's buying her Capitol Hill. How did she go in dressed?
Well, she was not. I think she was a nurse. Regina said she was a nurse, single mom. So the ladies went out and bought her the appropriate dress to be in the House. Which included. I mean, if you look at how AOC dresses, and she's high heels, makeup, and all of that. So.
So she tweeted out, that's what it was. So she tweeted out, the reality of being a regular person going to Congress is that it's really expensive to get the business clothes I need for the Hill. So I'm going to thrift shopping tomorrow. Oh, man. Okay, so Bush, a single mother of 2 children, gave up. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna look at that later, but so what I wanted to do with this here, let's get back to this real quick. This is the issue that we're fighting, is that and here's the issue. What Parminder said this morning comes in very loud and clear. A full, well-rounded human being should be able, if we take let's take that out, okay, and leave aggressive in there because that's and let's take the negative ones out of here. Caretaker, empathetic, nurturing, sensitive. Let's take that negative one out of here. And submissive, weak, or meek. Let's do that. Loving, kind. Let's take that out. Nonviolent, passive, and let's take out fashion standards. So these traits, strong, courage, warrior or fighter, provider, assertive, defender, protector. I guess we could take aggressive out, but it can be there. Vulnerable, emotional, caretaker, empathetic, da, da, da. A human being, regardless of gender, has the ability to be things on both sides of this list. They can be strong and courageous, but also emotional and empathetic and nurturing and sensitive, but also a defender and a protector, but also loving and kind, right? A well-rounded human person can have traits on both sides of these lists. But what Elder Parmenter pointed out this morning is that these are the traits. Let's go back to doodling. Men or boys are taught to not have any of these. These are weeded out of a man's character, and these are weeded out of a woman's character growing up. So they're literally, they come out as a whole person, and then if they're male or female, they get diverted over into this type of living or into this type of personality. And they're shaped and molded to fit these stereotypical kind of and even with that negative stuff, we can add that back in there, and then they'll go into each one of these, right? But if we remember when Jesus was on this earth, he was strong, and he was a defender, and he was a protector, and he had moments like at the temple where he was stern and assertive, but he was nurturing, he was sensitive, he was meek, loving, and kind and patient, and he had emotions. Ellen White describes him crying and the tears and the Gethsemane experience. He had vulnerability. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Is someone asking a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
They just unmuted by accident, I think.
Okay. So, yeah, Jesus had both of these, and so that's kind of what it is supposed to be. But for some reason, we take these attributes here, and this is what society decided was appropriate for a leader to have. But if Christ represents a leader, he is the number one leader, and he had both of these, then why is it women who have these types of characteristics are treated with, I don't know how to spell it, I'm going to just say this, suspicion? For whatever reason, women are in leadership.
Oh, that's it.
I'm not sure why it keeps getting unmuted.
Just keep an eye on that if it comes out again. Anyways, so for whatever reason, the number one issue with women in leadership positions is that they're treated with suspicion. And these roles, these characteristics that women have been relegated to, like trained and molded to have these specific traits of character, are considered not useful for leadership positions, which actually isn't true, because a lot of these characteristics would be very valuable to leadership roles and could help in a really incredible way. But there's a really negative connotation with these feminine character traits and leadership positions. So it makes people feel uncomfortable, and it makes people look at women in leadership positions with suspicion. And I just thought that we should kind of try to break it down and investigate what it is that's going on, what's causing all this to happen. Because we have women who haven't had the experience of being leaders in this movement. Some women have, like Elder Tess says, there have been rebels and strong women, but there have been women who haven't had that opportunity, and so they don't have the experience. But either way, they're going to be in teacher positions and leadership roles. So we, one, have to help each other, and two, we have to work on ourselves to figure out, is there something in us that's having a negative feeling towards any of these women, and what is it that's causing that? Is it, why are we so dissatisfied with the decisions that they make from their point of view that they see that are important? And did Fel have, or Legina have anything to say?
Brother Fel, do you have a question?
Something's going on with my computer here.
Oh,
But anyways, you know, just a suggestion. I know that we, you know, like to place labels. Yeah, I know, like we like to place labels, and then we like to, you know, put people in a category, people in a box, and anything out of that label, anything out of the box, you know, it makes whoever, yeah, whoever, you know, the rule is, you know, the golden rule. There's a saying, you know, golden rule. It's, you know who makes the rules is the one who has the most gold. That's the golden rule. So whoever that is puts, you know, labels people and put them in a certain category and wants to mold them and fit them into that category. And I remember watching a documentary quite a while ago, so I don't remember it. I don't remember all things, but it seems to me that, especially in the society and maybe other societies, I think what we're mostly afraid of is homosexuality. Yes, we have racism and we have sexism, but if you look at sexism itself, I think people are more afraid of homosexuality, and that's why, you know, men are supposed to be like this, and women are supposed to be like this. I remember back in, like I said, the documentary that I was watching back in maybe 1800s, early 1900s, female, I don't know why this sticks to my mind, but female teachers who were single were not, either were not hired as teachers, or they had to be married shortly after they got their job in order to stay, had to be teachers, because they thought that teachers that were not married, female teachers, not male teachers, but female teachers that were not married, that they were afraid that she had an affinity to other females. And so, because they did not want to show that to the students, the female teachers had to be married to get that teaching position. And there were other things. There were other, you know, characteristics that people were, you know, the one who were hiring were looking for. But that just stuck to my mind because they were afraid that she was a homosexual, and she didn't want that. Now they didn't, whether it be the superintendents, they didn't want that, you know, in the classroom. So she had to be married in order to be a teacher back in the 1800s.
I feel like I remember something about this. I might have watched that because it sounds really familiar. But so that is a good point, and that's actually what Elder Parmenter was talking about this morning, right? He said that if we allow men to have these types of characteristics that were considered, you know, feminine, then that man would be considered effeminate or homosexual.
Yes.
So there's this fear about that. And similarly, if you have a woman who now has these male characteristics, then she must be a lesbian. So, it's this strange way of thinking where I don't even know that we necessarily know what a regular human being is supposed to look like, because we've always had them split up and categorized in such different ways. But
Yeah, and if I may be, I think internally we know what we're supposed to be like internally. For example, let's just take me as an example as a man. Now, I'm going to be a little vulnerable here. Now, I was never allowed to cry.
mhm,
It's only recent that I actually just started crying when I felt like crying. But I was, if I cried, if I showed any pain, if I showed any so-called weak emotions, that was beaten out of me.
yeah,
So for a very long time, even though I felt like crying, I could not get myself to cry because so the feeling of wanting to cry, that was real me. But not being able to cry, that was something that was not real me, but that was instilled in me. So just taking myself an example, I think we all, when we look deep inside, we have that feeling, we have an emotion, we're supposed to be doing something. I think that's our real self. And what stops us is what we were made to be in someone else's image. That's what stops us from being who we really are.
yeah. And you know what else I found, which I think you might all also have experienced this, is there's moments where you realize things are happening that are wrong. Like growing up, I never really cared that much about makeup. There were a couple moments in my life where I tried it and I was like, oh, this is garbage. It's too much work and it doesn't look good anyways. And I hated it. And I never wanted to wear it. And that's what I really liked. I liked not wearing that stuff or not partaking in it. But it's still mingled in my brain because everyone around me was doing it. And I had friends who were like, oh, you'd look so nice with makeup. Why don't you try? Or, everyone will look at me like the frumpy one in the group, in my friend groups, because, everyone else is dressed with their tight clothes and their fancy stuff and their little jewelries and makeups and whatever. And I'm just in regular people clothes, which was what I was happy with and more comfortable with. But it's still a pressure in your mind that lingers back there. So it's not easy once you realize this, even once you learn about it and start to be able to identify it. It's still difficult because you have all this outside kind of pressure to look a certain way and act a certain way. So it is rough. But for the focus of this was specifically with women leaders in our movement. I wanted to look at this article because I thought it was really interesting. We might not get through the whole thing, but I just wanted to hold on because I'm not going to be able to read it. So, women rising, unseen barriers. Let's see here. So, many CEOs who make gender diversity a priority, that's those little classes I was talking about, by setting aspirational goals for the proportion of women in leadership roles, insisting on diverse slates of candidates for senior positions, and developing monitoring and training programs, are frustrated. So, what this is saying here in the beginning is CEOs of big companies are trying to change the structure of their companies to include women, in leadership roles, and to insist on diverse slates of candidates for senior positions and developing and mentoring programs for these women. So they're trying to do this, the form work, right? The work of the form. But what this article basically talks about is that they can do outwardly all they want it's going to fail if the mindset of the rest of the people in that company don't change along with it. So I thought it was really interesting. So they and their company spend time, money, and good intentions on efforts to build a more robust pipeline of upwardly mobile women, and then not much happens. So the problem with these leaders' approaches is that they don't address the often fragile process of coming to see oneself and to be seen by others as a leader. So some women will, just like I said, are very like strong and have always been kind of pushing the envelope, and so they have to deal with other people seeing them as leaders as they see themselves, but other women who haven't had that opportunity struggle to see themselves as leaders, and then with the combined with the environment around them, it makes the whole situation much worse. So becoming a leader involves much more than being put in a leadership role, acquiring new skills, and adapting one's style to the requirements of the role. It involves a fundamental identity shift. Organizations inadvertently undermine this process when they advise women to proactively seek leadership roles without also addressing policies and practices that communicate a mismatch between how women are seen and the qualities and experiences people tend to associate with leaders. So what this just said, because it can be a little bit wordy here. So organizations inadvertently undermine the process when they advise women to proactively seek leadership roles, which we're doing that in our organization process. But we're not, if you don't address the policies and practices that communicate a mismatch between how women are seen and the qualities and experiences people tend to associate with leaders. So if your policies communicate that you want leadership positions to have characteristics of a male leader, then it's going to be a mismatch if you're trying to, promote women to go to that, and then it doesn't match with what traditionally you want to expect your company to think a leader is. So a significant body of research shows that for women, the subtle gender bias that persists in organizations and disrupts the learning cycle at the heart of becoming a leader. This research also points to some steps that companies can take in order to rectify the situation. It's not enough to identify and instill the right skills and competencies as if in a social vacuum. The context must support a woman's motivation to lead and also increase the likelihood that others will recognize and encourage her efforts even when she doesn't look or behave like the current generation of senior executives. Does that make sense to everyone? Whoa.
Yes, it does make sense for sure. It's been my experience too in the past. I was a female business owner, and my husband really encouraged me to take it up. We had never owned a business, but he was a businessman in management with a big corporation company.
Yeah.
So his thought was for me to really take it up instead of being a housewife all these years. Of course, my children were grown. And he encouraged me. And he said, you're going to be the one that has to do the business plan to open this business. And I was fearful, very fearful. But I'm just talking about running a business.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking so much as what this was going to do for me personally as an individual, and how it was going to give me a lot of courage, a lot of these traits that we have here on the board that I needed and that God saw I needed at this time that this was happening. And it definitely changed me for sure. And it gave me much faith and courage. And I had a walk with the Lord, trusting God. And I knew that this was a plan that that he was putting forward so that this would be not only a blessing to me, but to others, as well as to my husband. So my husband was he was a co-owner and I was the owner, but the business was in my name because I did the business plan. He said, you can do it. I know you can. And I took some classes to learn about it, doing a business plan. And I knew that the people that I was talking to for where this business was going to go, they said, if you don't do a business plan, you're not going to have a successful business. So, and at this time, it's been over 20 years ago, the people from the banking industry were really looking at supporting women because they wanted to see women owning their own businesses. And they looked on the very positive side to really make sure that these women, even if they were women of color, whatever nationality, didn't matter. They just wanted to help women, and they were there to, you know, if you had a good business plan put together for what you were going to do, it didn't matter. You just had to have the plan in order. And then the bank was ready to loan you the money. So yeah, I'm just sharing my own experience, but I see this. I think it has made me owning my own business, and my husband there, you know, every now and then. He wasn't there totally because he had another business and he was running that. So, but it was something that really gave me such a change of my value and what I was worth.
Yes.
It just totally, you know, it was more than just being a housewife raising my children.
Yeah.
And it's made me, I mean, I should say God has made me through it a very strong personality, very strong person. And to just take it up, and I see it even coming into this message. He's given me this ability now to just know that he wants me to be a true leader. And I've already had this background.
Yeah.
So this is going to be as hard as maybe I would think it would be, because God's already prepared me for it. And, you know, as long as I'm walking with him and trusting him and really knowing he has a plan, not only for me, but for all women in this message at this point. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I see how different I am now, how changed I am. And it's like, I'm not saying I'm fearless, but I lost a lot of this baggage of being fearful.
Yeah. So it's really subtle, and I don't think people really realize it overtly. But when your group of people, such as women, are considered to be more sensitive, more emotional, and they have to be protected and taken care of, that makes you feel like a nuisance and it lowers your self-value.
Yes.
So it may seem cute and nice on the outside in a biblical sense. Well, we have to take care of them. They're so sweet and kind and loving, but they need protection and da 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 da. Then someone is always having to take care of you and do things for you because you can't for yourself and you're just a baggage. I don't think people
Exactly.
realize that brings your self-worth a little bit lower.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, so you're kind of in a really subtle, what was that other article I was reading? In a subtle way, benevolent sexism. It was an article talking about sexism in the church, just Christianity in general. So there's hostile sexism, which is associated with viewing women as manipulative rivals who aim to dominate men. And there's benevolent sexism associated with viewing women as fragile and in need of men's protection. So
So
one of those,
extreme on each side.
yeah, Right. So this article goes into a little bit of that too, because you put women in a position that doesn't make any sense. Because if they're too soft, you don't consider them a leader, but if they're too hard, then they're not likable and you don't want to deal with them. So what are they supposed to be? You know, they can't, there's nothing they can do without you getting mad at them. So it's this impossible position that women in leadership get put in, that is like, what do you expect them to do? Like, why are you holding them to standards that you would never hold another man to? You know what I mean? And they have to jump through all these extra hoops. They can't just be themselves and use the skills they have with who they are to do what they do.
Exactly.
It's nonsensical. So let's read here. People become leaders by internalizing a leadership identity and developing a sense of purpose. Internalizing a sense of oneself as a leader is an iterative process. A person asserts leadership by taking purposeful action, such as convening a meeting or revive a dormant project. Others affirm or resist the action, thus encouraging or discouraging subsequent assertions. These interactions inform the person's sense of self as a leader and communicate how others view his or her fitness for the role. So, as a person's leadership capabilities grow, and opportunities to demonstrate them expand, high-profile, challenging assignments and other organizational endorsements become more likely. Such affirmation gives the person the fortitude to step outside a comfort zone and experiment with unfamiliar behaviors and new ways of exercising leadership. This is going to become important because all our middle management and lower management leaders, when we have more people coming into this movement, roles are going to change and there's going to be more responsibilities, and these people are going to have to be able to to have the trust of the people who they're leading, you know, to know what to do and how to change things up so things keep running smoothly. So it's a lot of this has to do with basically our trust in our leaders, because if we don't trust them, it has a really bad impact on our leaders to be able to do what they need to do for us in return. You know what I mean? So it's a really bad mechanism of operation, and it's what Elder Parmenter and Elder Tess keep talking about. It we need to fix. So an absence of affirmation, however, diminishes self-confidence and discourages him or her from seeking developmental opportunities or experimenting. So leadership identity, which begins as a tentative peripheral aspect of the self, eventually withers away, along with opportunities to grow through new assignments and real achievements. Over time, an aspiring leader acquires a reputation as having or not having high potential. So the story of an investment banker we'll call Amanda is illustrative. Amanda's career stalled when she was in her 30s. Her problem, she was told that she lacked presence with clients, who were mostly older men, and was not sufficiently outspoken in meetings. Her career prospects looked bleak, but both her reputation and her confidence grew when she was assigned to work with two clients whose CFOs happened to be women. These women appreciated Amanda's smarts and the skillful way she handled their needs and concerns. Each in her own way started taking the initiative to raise Amanda's profile. One demanded that she be present at all key meetings, and the other refused to speak to anyone but Amanda when she called, actions that enhanced Amanda's credibility within her firm. In our industry, Amanda explains, having the key client relationship is everything. Her peers and supervisors began to see her not just as competent project manager, but as a trusted client advisor, an important prerequisite for promotion. These relationships, both internal and external, gave Amanda the confidence boost she needed to generate ideas and express them forthrightly. Whether to colleagues or to clients, her supervisors happily concluded that Amanda had finally shed her meek and mild-mannered former self and stepped up to leadership. So I don't think we're going to have time to get through it all, so I'm going to link it to everyone to read because it's really important, because what this says further on is that female leaders often have an issue with being able to connect with their male staff, the people who work under them who are male, and people who have specific ideas of what a woman's position should be. And then it talks about when a woman gets pregnant, how they're, given lower position jobs just so she can maintain her family also while working, and told that that's easier. Different things that are really sexist, that they would never do for a man, but they will, change things up just because someone is a female. So it goes through a lot of different things, but the cooperation is a huge, huge part. Like how people cooperate with women leaders has a huge effect on a company and how things are organized and how it works. So that's why this is such an important thing.
They get threatened as well. Men get threatened by
Yeah.
strong women. And I mean, years ago, I was in an emotionally abusive, long time ago, relationship, and I can only attribute, and I've shared this before, some of it, but I can only attribute the change that happened to me was a God that I did not even know, because I completely did a 180 in just a very short period of time. And it empowered me that I do not have to take that behavior. And what happened in the relationship was it literally defused the abuse. It was emotional abuse. It literally defused the abuse. But then the man couldn't handle being around a strong woman. And, we parted ways. And that was like a beginning for me of becoming empowered and growing out of that doormat type behavior of being submissive to, I wasn't going to be submissive to anybody. And then I had, growth to go that direction as well. But they are threatened to be around. And I think that's what she's saying when you were going through her notes, that, looking at these characteristics are all okay until it comes to where they're your boss.
Yeah.
And so once they become your boss, now it's not so good, because now I have a woman telling me what to do. And it's just not in some of their mechanics to have a woman tell them what to do. Even if you're telling them out of care and concern and love for them, they cannot have a woman tell them what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an insecurity.
Yeah.
And
it threatens. It's a mechanism in them that they also have to, because both sides have to get through these things. It's a defense mechanism to when they're threatened to react this way.
yeah. And that's the other thing, is that I don't feel like people make enough of an effort to understand each other, because someone might not operate the way you do or you're normally used to. That doesn't mean that person's a bad person. It just means they do things differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just, there's so much communication that needs to happen, and so much of us searching ourselves, because this is so deep. Like for this right here, educate everyone about second generation gender bias for women. So more than 25 years ago, the social psychologist Faye Crosby stumbled on a surprising phenomenon. Most women are unaware of having personally been victims of gender discrimination and deny it even when it is objectively true, and they see that women in general experience it. Many women have worked hard to take gender out of the equation, to simply be recognized for their skills and talents. Moreover, the existence of gender bias in organizational policies and practices may suggest that they have no power to determine their own success. When asked what might be holding women back in their organizations, they say, "It's nothing overt. I just feel less of a connection, either positive or negative, with the guys I work with. So sometimes I seem to have difficulty getting traction for my ideas. I look around and see that my male colleagues have P&L responsibility, and most of us are in staff roles. I was advised to make the move to a staff role after the birth of my second child. It would be easier, I was told, but now I recognize that there is no path back to the line. My firm has the very best intentions when it comes to women, but it seems every time a leadership role opens up, women are not on the slate. The claim is made that they just can't find women with the right skill set and experience. So these statements belly the notion that gender bias is absent from these women's work lives. Second generation bias does not require an intent to exclude, nor does it necessarily produce direct, immediate harm to any individual. Rather, it creates a context akin to something in the water, in which women fail to thrive or reach their full potential, feeling less connected to one's male colleagues, being advised to take a staff role to accommodate family, finding oneself excluded from consideration for key positions. All these situations reflect work structures and practices that put women at a disadvantage. Without an understanding of the second generation bias, people are left with stereotypes to explain why women as a group have failed to achieve parity with men. If they can't reach the top, it is because they don't ask, are too nice, or simply opt out. These messages tell women who have managed to succeed that they are exceptions, and women who have experienced setbacks that it is their own fault for failing to be sufficiently aggressive or committed to the job. We find that when women recognize the subtle and pervasive effects of second generation bias, they feel empowered, not victimized, because they can take action to counter those effects. They can put themselves forward for leadership roles when they are qualified but have been overlooked. They can seek out sponsors and other support and develop them in those roles. And then there was another thing. This one was interesting. So second generation bias is embedded in stereotypes and organizational practices that can be hard to detect. But when people are made aware of it, they see possibilities for change. In our work with leadership development programs, we focus on a small wins approach to change. In one manufacturing company, this is an example, a task force learned that leaders tended to hire and promote people, mainly men, whose backgrounds and careers resembled their own. They had good reasons for this behavior. Experienced engineers were hard to find, and time constraints pressured leaders to fill roles quickly. But after recognizing some of the hidden costs of this practice, high turnover, difficulty attracting women to the company, and a lack of diversity to match that of customers, the company began to experiment with small wins. For example, some executives made a commitment to review the job criteria for leadership roles. One male leader said, "We write the job descriptions, the list of capabilities for our ideal candidates." Okay? What they want. We know that the men will nominate themselves even if they don't meet all the requirements. The women would hold back. Now we look for capabilities that are needed in the role. That's not just some unrealistic ideal. We have hired more women in these roles and our quality has not suffered in the least. So when the standards of your hiring practices are an ideal role that you want to be filled the way you would act in it, and you're a guy and only other guys are going to, apply to that, then of course you're going to exclude women. But these ideals, they don't even have anything to do with the job position. So when they actually started hiring people that meet the requirements for just what the job position needed, then everything was set back into place. I thought that was really interesting. And this is another part. I'm going to read this paragraph and this will be the last one. So consider performance feedback, which is necessary for growth and advancement, but full of tripwires for women. In many organizations, 360-degree feedback is a basic tool for deepening self-knowledge and increasing awareness of one's impact on others. Skills that are part and parcel of leadership development, but gender stereotypes may color evaluators' perceptions, subjecting women to double binds and double standards. Research has amply demonstrated that accomplished, high-potential women who are evaluated as competent managers often fail the likability test. So that's that. If she's not vulnerable, she's not likable, right? That Elder Tess was talking about. So whereas competence and likability tend to go hand in hand for similarly accomplished women. So we see this phenomenon in our own research and practice. Supervisors routinely give high-performing women some version of the message, "You need to trim your sharp elbows." Likewise, we find that participants in women's leadership development programs often receive high ratings on task-related dimensions, such as exceeds goals, acts decisively in the face of uncertainty, and is not afraid to make decisions that may be unpopular. But low ratings on relational ones, such as takes others' viewpoints into account and uses feedback to learn from her mistakes. We also frequently encounter women whose performance feedback seems contradictory. Some are told they need to be tougher and hold people accountable, but also not set expectations so high, to say no more often, but also to be more visible, to be more decisive, but also to be more collaborative. So it's like,
For the Sabbath closing.
oh, okay. So yeah, that was the last paragraph. So I'm pretty much done, but that's,
I just want to note the time.
huh?
I don't mind if you keep going, but the Sabbath is closing.
Yeah. No, we're pretty much done. I put the link in the chat. So I hope that was helpful. I thought it was really interesting, and it's just something we should think about. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and pray and close. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great presentation. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for all that we're learning about ourselves and about the way we perceive people in the world around us. We ask that you please help us to search ourselves and figure out what perceptions we have of people that aren't right. Bring to our minds, our conscious minds, the deep hidden things that we don't realize are there, Lord, that we were indoctrinated into since birth that we don't know about. And help us, Lord, to be able to be willing to give that up and to change so that we don't have any negative impact on the people around us anymore. And help us, Lord, to help and sustain our leaders and the women who are taking positions that normally they wouldn't. They're in a difficult situation, and we need to be there and be supportive so that they can flourish in their positions and this movement can go forward with strength. Lord, please help us to take up our work and do it faithfully and to draw closer to you and to be humble in our hearts. We thank you so much for the Sabbath and for the time we're able to spend with each other. And we ask that you be with us this upcoming week. Help us to get through it and to have more experiences that we need to help us grow. And we thank you, Lord, so much for all that you do for us and all your infinite love and kindness and patience. We pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.